Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Everybody talks about the rift between the CMO and the CEO, the CMO and the CFO, the CMO and the CRO. Sales and marketing is a long fought battle. What if you didn't have a sales and marketing team? What if you just had a unified commercial engine? Stick around, we talk about that today with Jeff Lowe.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Mark Binkley and Vasilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
Welcome to the show today. We have Jeff Lowe, EVP and Chief Commercial Officer at Smart Technologies, which is a really cool company with a global footprint based right here in Calgary. So, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Mark, how are you doing? It's always great to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm great. V and I are super excited about this chat. So, the theme around this is F the B word, forget, fuck the brand word, whatever you want to call it. But there's
right off the bat, I love it.
Yeah. So we were in a conversation maybe a month ago or so now, but you were telling me this really cool story about how you were suggesting we should forget about the brand, using the word brand, which led down this really interesting conversation that we wanted to actually start recording with you. Because I think it's such an important point. And just to set some of the tone around this conversation, there's a lot of challenges that CMOs and marketers are facing. Things like justifying marketing budgets, proving a return, defending the balance between long-term branding and short-term. And so I know you've had a lot of experience with this. You've clearly, with the F the B word idea, you've got really carefully thought out approaches to this and how to solve some of these problems, even so far as like bridging the gap that we see between a lot of departments. You've been on both sides of the marketing side and the HR side and the sales side. So right. I think you've got a really interesting perspective, and we're really excited to chat with you about this conversation today.
I always love talking about anything marketing with you, Mark. So great to look forward to it.
Awesome. So in terms of like the misalignment, there's tons and tons of things that have been popping up so far between CMOs and sales, marketing and product, CFOs and marketing, CEOs and marketing. It seems like every week there's a new article popping up that outlines the challenges. Maybe can you provide some context from your side in terms of like what's creating some of this misalignment? If you want to just pick one side.
Yeah. I mean, to me, a big part of it is a lack of common definition of what the heck marketing is. And I think if you went out and you asked for 100 CMO job descriptions, you'd probably get 100 documents that are very different from each other. And if you compare that to give me a job description for a head of sales or a CFO or a VP operations, they'd be pretty similar, and they speak in a common language. And I don't think we have that in marketing. In fact, I know we don't. I'm part of a study that's going on right now to tackle just that gets to a common taxonomy for the marketing function itself. And I've been in marketing my whole career. I've always been like a student of the profession. So I just love this stuff. Is why doesn't marketing have more standards and consistency and taxonomy? So for example, you look at the finance function, going back to that, a debit is a debit, a credit is a credit. We have GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. Everybody knows that's a common language. In marketing, you really don't have anything like that. You ask one person what demand gen or product marketing or content means to them, and it'll mean something totally different to the next CMO or the next marketing organization. So this study I'm part of with this organization out of New York is saying, what we need in marketing is something like GAMP, generally agreed to marketing principles and practices. So I think that causes a lot of the disconnect because there's not a commonly understood language of what it is that marketing does that brings value to the organization.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Well, first off, welcome from my side as well, Jeff. Super excited to get into this with you. I think about what you just said, and let's just think quickly, like the funnel. The funnels died. So we can't even agree if the funnel even exists in the traditional sense or some of those stages. The other side is even things like agreeing on, like you said, not only the taxonomy, but lead gen versus demand generation versus like all the different nuances of our practice that everyone feels like they need to carve out their own little special place instead of it just unifying and say, hey, no, this is just marketing, everyone. Like,
no, exactly. And then, you throw the difference. So we're talking about finance and marketing, but what about sales and marketing, which is even closer to everybody's heart, right? Like that's the age-old debate of the silos between sales and marketing. So that's why it's been over 3 years now that we consolidated sales and marketing at Smart. So we literally don't have the departments anymore, which is a really bold move, and we can talk more about that. But it just comes back to when you think through it from a customer perspective, it's dead obvious. And I think everybody knows it. It's just really hard to do to change. But what I'm talking about is, think of your business, think of any business, and a customer has a need. And so what do? Well, they try to figure out who can help solve their problem. And so they might do some internet searching, go to some discussion groups, maybe attend some industry events. They're probably going to talk to some of their colleagues. They're going to find out who else has had this same problem that they can maybe learn from. They might then go to 3 or 4 companies that can help them. They might talk to 1 or 2 of them in person over the phone. They may get some demos. Then they probably need to get, because it's B2B, it's not one person buying, it's a buyer group. So then they got to rally the troops and see where they're at. Then they find out that someone had a different experience. So they need to hear about how that the training and implementation is really important for them. So let's go talk to somebody about that. And then we need to find like a paper or a document about other people who have done this successfully. And anyways, on it goes. And it's pretty typical in B2B, right? It's 6, 8, 12 months. I know that's our business. And 12-month sales cycles. Finally, the customer buys. Okay. So let me ask you a question. Is that sales or marketing?
Yeah. It's sales.
So
it depends on who you ask. Marketing would say they brought the leads in.
It's so marketing.
I mean, the answer.
Sales would say they closed it.
But the answer is yes. It's the customer sees no difference. All they're doing is interacting with the brand, all the different touch points, sales, marketing, customer service, customer success for that matter. All of that is noise to they don't care. I'm interacting with the brand. So if that's the case, then why would we have sales and marketing as 2 separate functions? Yeah. And so I don't think I've never met anybody that actually doesn't agree with that. It's just doing something about that is varying degrees of success in terms of bringing those functions together.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges, you have these established silos and a way of doing things that is just so common. And so even if you're a new company, you just repeat what other people have done. So if there's a sales team in another company, then you have a sales team. And if there's a marketing team, then you have a marketing team. And
when we're talking about taxonomy earlier, and there's no real definition of marketing, but there is a definition of different functions in a business. And marketing is one of them. So, it's not even a thought of do we need marketing and sales, or is that even the right way to go? Because that is so established. Nobody's saying, hey, is HR really a function anymore, or should it be combined with something else? But that is what we should be. But that is what we should be talking about when it comes to sales and marketing.
Yeah, it's interesting because the customer doesn't care. To your point, like it's true in B2B too, or B2C, I should say. Like
100%.
If I'm going to the grocery store, I don't care that there's a logistics person that purchased the beans that I'm looking at buying that I'm seeing on the shelf, and there's a stock person there, and the checkout person. Like I just care that they have the product that I want to get. I don't think about all the other elements behind what got that product into my basket.
Yeah. And it's, the more digital everything has become, the less buyers want to talk to a salesperson at all. And that's just the reality. That's just the data. It's gone down to something like 75% of customers in B2B would prefer not to talk to a human. to make their purchase. That's just the way, because everything is at their fingertips. And so, but depending on the size and the complexity and the nuance, it doesn't mean you don't need face-to-face salespeople. It means the number of at-bats, if you will, have gone down noticeably. So a lot of times the procurement is happening with no interaction whatsoever from a face-to-face rep. Yet we have different comp plans and different
incentives.
Different incentives and different views on sales that says, well, in that case, with a historical lens, that is all marketing. Like if it's all if it's went to the website, did a review, did a head-to-head comparison, got advice from an influencer, went to a preview comparison site, ended up buying online. Is that marketing or sales? But it's the marriage of both, and not treating them as separate functions that I think is the key. And like I said, easier said than done.
Yeah. So on that note, like, let's dig into this the UCE idea. As far as one of the areas where you have demonstrated a process for bridging the gap between sales and marketing, you created this UCE, Unified Commercial Engine. Yeah. And there's actually we can put a link in the show notes about the article from HBR that talks about this. But can you, like, you've done that, I think it's 3
just over 3 years ago now.
Yeah. So, how's it working? And like, what if you were to go back in time and remember what it was like during the beginning? Like, was there challenges that you didn't realize were going to be a challenge that were, and
for sure,
other ones where you thought there was like this would be. Well, anyway, you get my point.
No, I mean, we're still learning. 3 years later, we're still trying to tune it to be, it's a unified commercial engine. We're still trying to tune the engine. It's not at all figured out or nothing close to perfect. And it actually took at least 6 months until after we launched it, where we first started seeing the green shoots of progress. And then we're like, okay, yes, we've done the right thing here. So it was definitely a lot of lessons learned. But to go back to the beginning, to your question, Mark, we were having this exact conversation we're having right now as a leadership team at Smart 3.5 years ago. And this exact same conversation of we're still too siloed. Our teams are not talking with each other. We've tried everything. We had the offsite. We did the big thing in Chicago. We've set up these Tiger teams and put them together. We've had webinars. We've tried it all, right? And just incremental gains, but nothing. Just the teams are still not on the same page. And I think one of the straws that broke the camel's back was the marketing team launched a massive new initiative, big global campaign, really important, really expensive, months in the making, and along the way, quote unquote, sales was involved. Sales is bought in. Okay, I'm using air quotes, right? So then, what happened is the campaign was launched, and then there was a big sales team call that a couple of the members of the marketing call just happened to be on, but the sales leadership didn't know that there was marketing people on the call. And it was, did you guys see that new marketing campaign that launched? What a colossal waste of time. I cannot believe that does nothing for our business. So therefore, to make it even worse, we're launching our own campaign. Yeah. And so instead of zigging over here, we're going to zag over there and spend our own dollars and do a different campaign. And that's when that was one of the straws that broke the camel's back, saying we just have to do something different. And if you listen to the pundits at the time, they were saying the same things that the pundits right now are saying, which is sales and marketing need to be consolidated. We need to blow up the model. We do not have a customer-centric model on the commercial side of the business. This is what Gartner, Forrester, and others were saying 4 or 5 years ago. And so we decided to do something about that. And without going too in depth on what we did, say, well, how did you do it, or how did you organize? It's a very simple answer: is we organized around being helpful to the customer, by
helping buyers buy.
helping buyers buy. And so we looked at the buyer journey. And so I'm sure most of the listeners have a buyer journey schematic of some sort, in terms of what the customer does, all the way from understanding they have a problem to learning who can help them, all the way, there's all sorts of acronyms and so forth that people use for their buyer journey. The one, we were working with a consultancy out of the UK, and we were like, we know we want to consolidate, we just don't know how or what we're going to do next. And we were literally blank page. We were really struggling for a couple of days in a workshop to say, what are we going to do? It was actually getting quite frustrating until we saw this buyer journey map. And in this case, it was an infinity loop, because if at the end of an infinity loop, you have a really happy customer and then they recommend and then goes back into the top, someone else is learning. So somebody in the meeting, we had a small committee looking at this. Someone in the meeting said, hey, why don't we just organize around this? So our org chart, if I showed it to you, is literally our buyer journey map. So the first thing that a customer does that pertains to our company is the process of learning. So I have a problem of some sort. I am learning who can help. Where do they learn? Primarily online. That's human behavior today, but also in person. But anyways, it's a role that the buyer group has a role. The first role that impacts a brand, a vendor, is learn. So we said, what if we had a function called learn? And it's an org chart. There's a head of learn, and there's people that every day, we always say, when you wake up, my job is to help the customer fill in the blank. So that's right. In that case, learn. And so we don't have marketing. We have an organization that is responsible for helping the customer learn. And then we challenged everybody to pick one Uber metric that says, what is the metric for helping the customer learn? And then we did the same throughout the buyer journey. And without taking you through the whole thing, there's 8. There's 8 roles. And so we have 8 teams. So it's by doing that, by reframing, and then you go through the entire team. So this impacted 235 people at Smart. Every single person was, okay, this individual here, what is her primary role? Is it to help the customer learn, buy, adopt, support? Or there are some underlying functions that are like, well, I support the entire journey. So something like the web presence overall has all of those things. So there are some enablers, but you go through your entire staff and say, what is the primary role as it pertains to the customer journey for this person? And so that person should be in learn then. So what you had is almost everybody changing their job title and changing who they report to.
It's interesting. Sorry, V.
It's okay.
Yeah, you can see you asking like you've got a question on your lips. You go ahead. I'll ask this one afterwards.
Well, there's so much here because I can see when you're trying to essentially commit to the buyer journey in that context, you're forced to have strategic conversations that allow the proper flow from each stage potentially. So it helps unify the organization. My big question was going to be around like the change management. You talked about it. So over 200 people are being affected on this. You're going to have people that probably still think very linearly, siloed, et cetera. What did change management look like?
I'm so glad you asked that because that is the answer to my question that Mark asked 5 minutes ago, which was, what were some of those hidden challenges that you, or if you had to do it over, what would you do? It's change management. Is we really underestimated the implications in change management and getting people comfortable with this, because I think as a leadership team, we'd been in this mind space for months, and all of a sudden it's not like we dropped like a bomb. We did bring the people along and say, here's what we're considering doing. And but it's such a big change. And also the role that we were asking a lot of our team members to take on is to say, you're no longer in sales. You're now managing a commercial team that has the entire end-to-end buyer journey in it. Because that's what we did is we went to our most senior people and said, we would like you to lead a commercial pod, we call them. So that's how this manifests in our company. We have 7 commercial pods. And so that's the team. And so we went to our best and brightest and said, and their background is primarily sales, for the most part, when I'm thinking through the leaders for the pods. So basically making like a general manager for a commercial business role for these folks. And then going to people in marketing saying, hey, I know you're a social media expert, for example. That's not changing, but we are changing who you're reporting to, because you're now going to be in this commercial pod, and your team members are going to be people in that pod who support the rest of the buyer journey. So it's not so much that your day-to-day is changing, but your team is absolutely changing.
Yeah.
And so for us, we thought, well, this will be good, right? Because the people will welcome the increased responsibility. And then they'll love the chance to work with new team members. It's just a huge change.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of HR implications, obviously, with job descriptions and writing all that up. Cost code centered, like how in a company all of your cost centers are structured for all the sales and marketing. And so we are way too late in the game. Speaking of finance, working with our finance team on, we're actually not going to do any of that anymore, and we're now adopting this new cost center change. So there was but
conversation.
Even to this day, like if you fast forward 3 years, there's still instances where we fall back into more of a traditional element of the parts of the buy organization helping the customer learn, for example, and or vice versa, and so it's always an ongoing evolution to really live that model. But the biggest thing, you guys, is so it's been very successful, by any number of metrics that I can talk to. The biggest thing about this is reframing who the team is. That's I always come back to that. That is because if I'm in marketing, and so 4 years ago, if I used to be in marketing at Smart, now I'm in the UCE. The so what about that is my team used to be, I used to be, for example, on the creative team, and then so my team was other creatives, and then I worked with the demand gen team and the content team and the events team, right, in my marketing function. Right now, I'm on the learn team in a commercial pod, and my team is the team that helps customers buy, adopt, support, and use our solution. And every day I meet with them. Yeah. And so what you get is a truly unified customer-centric view of the world. And for things like career trajectory, it's like, wow, people's eyes are opened. Is, well, I could go into a role over here and help the customer buy or help the customer adopt, and people get to know each other, right? And the feedback back to me is like from the former sales organization, for example, saying, "Hey Jeff, like I met this guy who's on the Learn organization, and man, is he fantastic! He's so smart and he's so helpful for a business. And where he been keeping this guy?" And I'm like, no, he's been there all along. Yeah. Right. It's just the fact that now you're on the same team, and so it's not we're doing a marketing presentation to sales or the monthly webinar. Yeah. It's people get to know each other, and as humans, and they're on the same team. So there's a huge, just a huge cultural HR dynamic to this that is really key.
Yeah, it really. I would imagine, like as you're describing, the instant diversity of thought that you get just by mixing people up and not forcing them, but like creating these new work environments, changes everything about the whole dynamic.
It does. Like it is really interesting. Like in some ways, nothing changes because your craft is still the same. Yeah. On the other hand, everything changes because now the people around you every day are from all sorts of different parts of the buyer journey.
Yeah. It's funny. We were just talking to a guy named Eddie Obeng, and he's like, I'm a real believer in that. If you orient to the customer, you're going to succeed more often than not. And so his analogy was like, a marketing person's customer might be sales, and the salesperson's customer might be the customer, and it's and it just kind of it works. It's not to say that everybody is serving the customer directly one-on-one, but there's customers internal and external, and so it sounds to me like you've done that, orient to the customer by creating these unified commercial engines. And then the other thing that I was thinking about was that rather than creating this like a reporting lines based on functions that we're all used to seeing in a hierarchy chart, weirdly enough, I was just talking about this article the other day with a guy. It's on HBR called Organographs. And so it was a Henry Mintzberg article from like the 80s or 90s. But he was showing a way to draw how organizations actually work based on serving a customer need rather than the reporting lines. So it sounds like that's kind of what you've done. And so
that's right.
Nothing's different because you still have all the same people, except everything's different because you're just not making them report up to, say, the CEO and now reporting to essentially the customer.
That's exactly it. And it's a fascinating study in like human psychology almost of what happens when you put people together and they get to know each other as humans, as people. And because that's what happens when you're on a team, isn't it? You spend time together, you understand what people's interests are inside and outside of work. Of course you get to see how they apply their craft and what their profession is. And that is so different from, I watched this marketing presentation at last month's town hall and I didn't understand a word of it. Is it the funny other?
It didn't resonate with me.
It didn't resonate, and
Yeah, and then you get the sales guys going, "We're gonna do our own fucking thing."
Yeah,
like what a joke. I was laughing at that before because I was in sales a long time ago, but that was the thing. Like we would sit in these marketing presentations, and then at the end of it, all the sales guys would go to the bar, and it's like, as if we're going to do any of that.
Well, it's funny, right? Because around a year after we did this reorg, because my former role, of course, was the head of marketing. So I was the guy at a town hall giving the big brand presentation.
Yeah.
Right. And I was fired up and just excited as could be about our new brand launch and going through what a big deal was and how important this was for the customer and for our company. And then around a year after, when there was quite a bit of comfort in the UCE, and I think it was after a couple of beverages on one of my road trips. Well, yeah. Well, one of our senior sales guys says, "Jeff, I got to level with you." He said, those big presentations you used to do, talking about like the brand and all this, mentioning the different campaigns by name that we were launching and so forth. He said, I got to tell you, like I was in the territory, like driving on the car listening, and it is just like Charlie Brown's teacher to me. Like wah. Like I literally just I wasn't really listening or care to listen. It's just but now I get it. Now I get what it is and how important it is to my pod.
Yeah.
So I said appreciate the honesty, but I think that's just all too common, right? And
100%.
It's like how could you not how could you not see how important that is? Like this is our brand. This is the voice of the customer, and it's just wasn't resonating. I just have to face the truth on that.
Yeah.
It's the same. The campaigns it's not like the campaigns got instantly better. The relationships got better.
The relationships changed. Yeah.
Right.
Which probably had a huge impact on the way your sales team went to market as well. Feeling like either because they were a part of the process or they're peripherally, they're around that new state of mind that all of a sudden 100%. Just probably supercharges them.
So our lead acceptance rate went up, which is probably one of the metrics that I'm proudest of for the UCE.
Mm-hmm. So it'd be like an MQL to an SQL?
Correct. MQL to SQL. 55 to 88% change. So from 55 to 88. So what did we do? We started doing amazing campaigns all of a sudden? Mm-hmm. No. Right?
Mm-hmm.
No. What we did is we had a team that acted like a team that sat down and said, what is the criteria for an SQL? Let's all agree to that together. And then let's go out and launch these campaigns, and the learn team will go launch that, and the buy team will accept So all of a sudden, guess what? When something comes in that you've been a part of crafting as a team, it's like, well, yep, this meets the criteria that I was part of constructing in the first place. So of course I'm going to accept it. So again, it's just a simple.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah.
So I was thinking about that because, sorry, now I cut you off.
No, go.
But you talked about culture a little bit, I guess like a few questions ago, and I wanted to take a moment and just kind of double click into that. And for those that are listening, Smart is known as not only a great organization, but they do have a very strong culture here in the city. So they have a really strong presence and understanding. So for me, my question is, was there a culture shift, or did Smart just naturally had a strong culture then when you went through this process of the UCE, that it made some of the adoption a little bit easier than maybe what it would have in a traditional setting?
Yeah, I think our culture and our what we call our behavioral framework. So we have a documented framework for not just the values we believe in, but the behaviors that attach to those values. So for example, one of our corporate values, this is kind of the stuff that you see hanging on the wall, and you say, well, that's nice, right? So we want to be, we're courageous. It's like, you and 50% of other companies out there would say that, but what we did is we took it to the next level of really codifying that. Is what does that really mean, right? And so one of the behaviors of what you do when you're courageous is you think big, you think change the world big. And that phrase, that didn't come from the exec team like on a tablet. That actually came from a really grassroots initiatives where our team came up with behaviors that attach to values. So that's probably another podcast, because I'm really passionate. I'm really passionate about that in terms of really codifying what it is, because your culture is your behaviors. We always say your culture. Like your culture is the worst behavior you tolerate. Is a common saying around Smart. So, but to your question, that sentiment of let's think change the world big really led us to say, we can have a conversation on not having sales and marketing. Like this is think big. We also have another value that's we're connected. And so that was another one, saying, hey, let's really lean into our value of connectedness and courage to do this. Now the flip side of that is we do enjoy really positive engagements at Smart. We're actually in the top 5% of Mercer Sorota's global benchmark in terms of their global engagement scores. That's been a real journey for Smart, because that was not always the case. We had a lot of tougher years when our engagement scores were more down in the 50s, which is I would describe that as a toxic environment. But we have since 2015, 2016 come up into the 80s and even high 80s, low 90s when it comes to our engagement. So with regards to the UCE, when we had sales and marketing, the average engagement score was, when you combine those, was 81. Post UCE, 92, which is not, so that's something we're trying to sustain, because that's an incredibly high score. So, I've now touched on my two favorite metrics of the UCE, which is
the lead acceptance
rate and employee engagement.
Lead acceptance rate is really also a nice way of saying it's a way of measuring your teamwork.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
100%.
That's wow. Yeah, that's cool. So there's no marketing and sales anymore, like as separate function. And by extension, I'm assuming that includes the UC includes the implementation and customer service.
Correct.
To some degree.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the pipeline, as we would know it, is all unified.
That's right. That team is called Adopt, by the way. They wake up every day and they help the customer adopt.
Yeah, that's cool.
It just makes it so simple. Anyways.
So then, okay, so going back to the original thing, well, not the original thing, but when we were talking about F the B word, it was because of that hallway conversation we had around, like, let's stop saying the word brand. But before we get into that part, I want to just talk about, we're also in budgeting season, and normally you would have marketers going, okay, well, how do we build a budget?
Mm-hmm.
We need a marketing budget, and I need to like justify some money for brand building. I need to justify some money for lead generation, or based on the GAMP, maybe there's some other common language that we need to adopt. But like, how do you start a budgeting process to begin with for this UCE?
Yeah, so it's going to be on the same theme that we've been on. Is you do it with the team. So there is no marketing team, therefore there is no marketing budget. There is no marketing plan. Right? So what is there then? There's a commercial plan, and there's a commercial budget. And so in fact, because we're a global company, there's 7. So what we need is 7 plans. What we think we need anyways is 7 commercial plans. And so those are done collectively with the cross-functional team that represents the stages in the buyer journey infinity loop. And so if you just think, and again, if you just try to simplify things and get it down to common sense, is it's about revenue and profitability, right? So those are the results on the scoreboard we're looking for. So you start there and say, well, what are those, right? Those are goals. Those are goals and KPIs. And then you get into strategies, tactics, owners, and dates. Well, that's just fundamental 101 planning. The challenge in business is most businesses do that in triplicate or quadruple by business function, instead of just saying, well, no, let's just talk about the Asia Pacific market, or let's just talk. I'm just talking about North America. Here's our targets for so in North America we split into 3 pods. So for the central pod of North America, here's our targets. Here's our commitments and accountabilities to the business. Right. What's our strategy? And who's going to do what? And documenting whose accountability is this? And let's review this on a weekly, monthly basis and report that up to the business. Instead of going through a QBR or an MBR and saying, okay, first up is sales, and then we're going to hear from marketing, and then we're going to hear from customer. Why wouldn't you just have the same plan?
Yeah, so
it's funny. It's so obvious when you say it out loud that I'm like, there's so much more complexity in it when you do. To your point, like you've got a business goal, and then everyone's trying to figure out how their independent functional goals ladder up to the business goal. Like, why not just make the business goal for everybody?
Exactly. So again, the culture of that, right? Because that requires you to set egos and titles aside and really work together on rolling up your sleeves on the plan. And so budgeting is the same thing. And it's collectively, what do we want to spend money on that maps to that plan? So it's, budget should follow strategies and tactics. And so we try to do that. The one exercise that we do, which is super interesting, is we do this poker table exercise. Literally a poker table. So this is early days in the UCE, where there was still a lot of ignorance between the two teams. And honestly, it was like a black wall, like a wall between the two teams in terms of separate budgets, like I said before, with cost centers, separate finance teams and our finance partners helping the marketing team versus the sales team, zero visibility into the budgets. Yeah. And that's when you get these big campaigns being launched saying, what a colossal waste of money that is. And then you have the marketing guys going, look at these sales guys traveling all over, whining and dining and golfing with their customers. What a joke, right? That's when you get all that conversation happening. Just take away all those barriers and have 100% transparency. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So imagine we literally built a poker table with the green felt. And we had all the divisions like on a craps table, right? But instead of numbers and so forth in there, it's categories of spend. So break it down in terms of where would you spend money? Well, you would spend money on events. You would spend money on content. You would spend money on you name it, right? So social media, digital marketing. Okay, that's all from the marketing side, quote unquote. Where else would you spend money? Well, travel. Like we spend a boatload of money on travel to support our global business. What else? Demo pool, right? MDF and channel spiffs.
Right.
Okay, so if you're on the marketing side saying, wait, what is that? How much do we spend? And then if you're on the sales side, you're saying, you know what? And so before I get to that, imagine you've got this poker chart and it's got these empty blanks. Give everybody in the room on the pod team one red chip to start. You've got one chip. What's the most important area where you can only put it on one space? What's the most important thing? So then it goes on to something that's very misunderstood, like content marketing or brand advertising or something like that. And what that does, you imagine a leadership team standing around a poker table. It invokes a conversation of, you know what, I got to be honest right now. I don't know what content marketing is. But you obviously feel so strongly you're putting your one red chip on that. What is it? So, and the way we used to do it is, let me do a mind-numbing 2-day offsite with 1.5 hours being 20 pages on content marketing. Now you're having a discussion of, why do I feel so passionately about this? That's my red chip. And then vice versa, right? What is demo pool? What does that even mean? Like, why do we have to spend money sending smart boards all over to do demos to our customers? Like, isn't there a better way to do that? Well, no, there's not, or yes, there is. So let's have that conversation. It's just 100% transparency.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's a step in terms of building the budget. But again, the key point is there shouldn't be a sales budget and a marketing budget and a customer service budget. There should be a commercial budget for a region or a market that you serve.
And so one of those challenges that people face, you're solving, like, in terms of how do you justify budgets? Because now you're solving that just by nature of having conversations with people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's
like, as opposed to, I'm going to slide a number across the table, you mark it up and then slide it back to me.
Which is typically your budget planning process.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And it doesn't mean you're going to get rid of all conflict or not, or it doesn't mean everybody's happy. Because it's kind of, there's a school of thought that I actually learned when I was at TELUS called fair process. So it doesn't necessarily mean fair outcome to everybody, because at the end of the day, someone's going to need to decide after everybody gets their opinion on the table where that money is going to go. But at least everybody has a say and it's 100% transparent.
Yeah.
And then the other great thing is we have zero conversations at Smart about the marketing budget versus the sales budget and why, defend your marketing budget. That's not a thing here, but defend your commercial budget. Absolutely.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what is really endearing, especially for really a brand guy at heart, right, is to see a pod leader stand up and defend helping the customer learn.
Yeah.
And say, we have to spend more in online to help our customers learn. This is coming from a pod leader who's a former, not former, but has most of his career in sales. And that's again because of the culture of putting the UCE together.
Mm-hmm. And there's an incentive there to increase the teamwork rate.
Yeah.
Right. Like, in terms of like the sales, except like there's a common objective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fascinating.
I came across a stat actually yesterday. I'm doing some research on something here for work, but it said that when in the B2B context, 90% of the process of choosing is done before someone even selects the potential partner that they're looking to. So, you talked about like the importance of contents education and things like that. That for me was really eye-opening, because I had never thought about all of the other research, or when the buyer's journey from a B2B perspective. And it's interesting because then when you're trying to position your company to ensure that you're driving most leads possible, it all starts again, well, how are you showing up in the research phase of that entire journey before they're even reaching out to the sales team?
Yeah, no, I think that number used to be like 75%. And it just keeps going up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's from the
But-
B2B Institute. But anyways.
Well, that B2B Institute is the same organization where I got the impetus to get rid of the B word.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So do you
That's a
guys
good
want to
point.
talk about that now? Because this,
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So-
Yeah.
but it's very much linked to this stat. But when I saw this piece of research from the B2B Institute, it just hit me over the head. It was just so important, and I would just encourage everybody who's listening to get a copy of this. It's pretty readily available. But what they did this big piece of research on B2B, and it's quant research. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so what it says is at any given point in B2B, 95% of the buyers are not in market.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, in the smartboard market, people buy smartboard for a classroom maybe once every 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. You can take this to a consumer. I always like to use a consumer example for this as well, right? Because it really lands with people. Is how often do you buy a car?
Yeah.
Or a pair of running
Or a house,
or a pair of
or
running
running
shoes,
yeah,
maybe
anything.
twice a year. A car once every 3 years. A house once every 10. Does that mean that you're not receiving messages from brands and forming an opinion in that time? No, right? But it's a different type of message. So so if you start with the fact that 95% of my buyers are not in market and 5% are, it goes right to the question of, well, what's the proper mix for how much should I be talking to the people who are out of market versus the ones who are in? Because the ones who are out, to your point, V, once they come into the market, like they're literally going to drop into whatever your buyer journey map you use. So for us, it's the infinity loop. One day they're going to drop into the infinity loop. They're going to have, what the research says, they're going to have 3 brands in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not one of those 3, you have next to no hope of getting the sale, because there's an emotional connection to one of 3 brands.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing this says is when you're talking to people in market, that's what sort of messages do you use? Mostly rational messages. So if it's in the
price
points, feature comparisons.
Yeah.
So if it's car market, it's this tech package versus that one, or this type of leather interior versus that, mileage, etc. If you're out of market, what sort of messaging? Emotion, right? Is how you're looking for shared values. You're looking to expound upon your purpose. And because people buy from people who believe in the same things as others, or there's something they identify with. So maybe the next time I'm, what's my position on Colin Kaepernick? And how does that influence the Nike brand next time I'm looking for a pair of runners? Right. So so here's the punchline on all this, though, right? Here's the wow moment when it comes to why would you take any of this to like a CFO or a CEO? Is there's a direct correlation between out of market share of voice, so SOV, and market share, SOM.
Yeah.
Almost a straight line correlation. So you grow your share of voice with customers who are out of market, you grow your market share down the line.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I took this research and I started showing it to some non-marketing execs all the way up to our CEO, and instantly the reaction is, well, we need to be doing more of this.
Yeah.
And then I started because us marketers, we all know what out of market and emotion. What's another word for that? Branding, right?
Yeah.
That's the campaigns that are based on not necessarily your products and services, but what you stand for and your purpose based on emotion. That's that's what we've been, branders have been passionate about for years in terms of making an affinity and a connection of what your company does with what they stand for. So I just started calling that over the last couple of years, out of market demand gen versus in market demand gen. So when you're generating demand out of market, you're focusing on emotional messages, and your measurements are things like share of voice, and so they're memory metrics. And then when you're marketing, when you're doing demand gen in market, you're more focused on rational messages, and you're measuring MQLs and SQLs, etc. And so what that instantly does is not say, should we be doing branding or demand gen? Because you ask 100 CFOs, if you had $1 more to spend, would you spend it on demand gen or brand? 100 will say demand gen. But if you ask the same 100 CMOs, should we be spending our next dollar on out of market demand or in market demand? It'll be, well, what do you mean by that? Well, let me show you. And it'll be, wow, I think we should probably be splitting that dollar. So B2BI says it should be 50-50. So if everybody's listening and thinking about your own, we're not there yet, by the way, on 50-50. Because it's hard, right? It's always the urgent and important discussion and the long-term versus short-term. Because the out-of-market demand gen is more of an investment in your future. And the in-market demand gen is what you need this quarter.
You need it now.
Yeah. But just the framing of that has really been hugely impactful just in terms of how we look at marketing spend.
Yeah, and the in and out of market, I mean, the other thing from B2B Institute is the cash flow funnels. And what I like about that, I just had this visual popping up as you were talking about that, Jeff. Like, you can talk about cash flow, right? Like your future cash flows versus present day cash flows. And so you can influence both.
Exactly. And
with the unified commercial engine, it's not so much that sales is going to do one and marketing is going to do other. You're all working towards a common goal.
That's right.
Of cash flow. And
this is the language that marketers need to speak. Cash flow, EBITDA, future value, present value. And so this is exactly what we're in right now is for our next year is how much should we be spending out of market? We put together as part of our poker chip exercise, if you will, and how much of an incremental investment in out of market demand gen will yield to our long-term revenues based on the associated market share. So we're equating market share to revenue and putting it into a business case to say we should be doing even more. But it's great, right? Because the language really catches on. Is we just did this really, really cool project in Australia where we digitized Indigenous content in Central Australia and put it into an environment where everybody could use it and share it across all sorts of really remote parts of Central Australia. And then there was a film crew there, and it went viral in the Northern Territory state of Australia, and then it got picked up and syndicated all over the whole country. So the only reason I'm telling you that story, other than it was a super cool experience, was we ended up getting 20 million press impressions and 25 articles, and it was on the evening news in every state in Australia.
Wow.
And so, and then what was really satisfying to me was the reaction from our CEO was, oh, this is great out of market demand gen.
Oh, so start using the language.
Yeah. Because that's exactly what it is. And it was an initiative that was put on by our Learn team for that pod to build our brand, basically. But we don't talk in that terminology, right? This is our out of market demand gen for our Asia Pacific pod.
Yeah. That's cool. It's cool when you see that adoption. Well, and it's because it's now common business language. You're not making people outside of marketing learn some foreign language like marketing lingo, like brand gen, demand gen, or lead gen, demand gen, and content marketing, content ninjas, whatever the thing.
I think it comes back to our conversation earlier on GAMP. Is non-marketing execs or anybody understands demand generation, right? So literally generating demand. But advocates of branding, myself at the front of the line, have always been advocating for brand building drives demand. It's strategic. It's just making that link is super tough. So just call it demand gen then. Call it out of market demand gen.
Yeah.
And then you've kind of synthesized it into one conversation.
I like one thing that you said there, that marketers, and it's probably a byproduct of how you've structured the team now, that's probably becoming a lot easier, but marketers do have to spend a lot more time on the understanding some of the nuances, especially on the finance side, like EBITDA, cash flow, future cash flow.
Yeah.
And Mark and I talk about this regularly, and I think it is a big gap that we have as marketers. But what I'm hearing and what I love about this, you're creating professionals right now that become well-versed and so diverse in both sides or equally in different areas of the business, that you're creating future leaders that could probably sit at larger tables as they continue to progress in their career, just because of their comfort level in all the different spaces, which is incredible.
Yeah, it's the world they're living in, because every day, again, because their team around them is talking about the dynamics of the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
I love that.
I would say there's like a renaissance happening with B2B marketing. It felt like everything was focused on B2C for a long time, with B2B Institute and making cuts of all the research from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute and evidence-based stuff. There's a lot more interest in what gets people's interest and attention. And it just seems like there's a real excitement around B2B. And so I'm just curious if there's anything that you find specifically really interesting in terms of like next things coming up for you, or just in general with the B2B marketing space.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of interest because of the 90% quote and the rise of digital is, and some pundits. I was recently at a Gartner conference where they were taking it to the level of, the marketing is now in the driver's seat. But I don't like to have it be like a competition and say who's in the driver's seat. But I think that's leading to the renaissance is, wow, everything is digital. 90% is being figured out before customers engage. Marketing's super important. So that's good. What I don't like is pitting it against, saying, so now marketing is in the lead and sales is taking a back seat. What I think is a really exciting part of the renaissance is this notion of buyer enablement and purpose. So those two things are really exciting to me, is having a ton of empathy for how tough it's been to be a buyer, how tough it's become to be a buyer, how complicated it is, right? So it's a lot of times it's the challenges our customers face is not so much with us as it is with them. And for you followers of Brent Adamson out there, this is the stuff that he so well informs us on, is the buyer group has now grown, just like the 90% has grown from 75. The buyer group size has grown from 6, 7 to now I think it's over 11. And it's just incredibly tough to rally everybody together to make a decision on anything. And so I think a big part of the renaissance within B2B marketing and sales is how can we enable bringing those people, those humans together to agree on something and make their life easier, not by necessarily just positioning how great our product and service is, but on how to unite the procurement arm with the end users and all the different decision makers that are involved in a purchase. So it really reframes how you think of things like thought leadership and content, of not just pushing out and saying hoping for an affinity back on that, but how can I use research and content to unify the buyer group? So that's the sort of thing that's really interesting to me, that's all part of this renaissance. But it reframes it when you look at, man, it's tough to be a customer these days. Because if you think about the last time you were a customer and you got together with your company and bought something, it's hard, right? People don't agree. The one thing people can usually agree on is low price is good. So that's a challenge if you're a premium brand. So what are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. The whole, the buyer experience is, it's kind of like because you're oriented towards the customer. Now it's easier to have those conversations with sales, marketing, customer service, implementation, but also in finance. The whole strategic direction of the company is pointed towards making it easy for a buyer to buy, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
Makes it so succinct.
Yeah. Jeff, how can people find out more about you and Smart? Sorry, we didn't even talk about what Smart really does. I mean, I mentioned tech, but so maybe just describe a bit about Smart and then how people can find out more about you and the company.
Sure. Allow me to introduce myself at the end of the podcast. So for those of you who don't know Smart, very, very proud Calgary-based global tech company. Been in the market for about 35 years, and many people don't know, but the initial idea of touching on a board and making something interactive with a finger or a pen, that was invented right here in Calgary by Smart, and is now become very ubiquitous technology all over the world. But we invented the entire category of smart boards, which we're very proud of, which is now used almost like a Kleenex or a Frisbee. Has become a ubiquitous term. But we're a global company, and over 3 million classrooms in the world. So our biggest strength is probably, or what we're really known for, is K-12 education. And we have both hardware and cloud-based software that allows seamless experience with personal devices. So all those Chromebooks and iPads going into classrooms, those all connect a teacher's content with a board, and or even students at home now for. So I often say, we're the smart board company, but we're actually in the engagement and interactivity business, because that's really what we do, is we provide customers with make whatever they're doing more engaging and interactive. And so we're in some pretty cool areas of the corporate world as well, different industry use cases. And so things are going very well at Smart. We've had a really great run over the past kind of half dozen years, and now we're looking to invest in new areas in the world, which is something that's taking most of my attention these days. So it's an exciting and fun time to be at Smart. The UCE obviously is a big part of that. And so smarttech.com is our website. I think my profile's up on there on our website, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm always, as you can tell, I'm always passionate to talk about the role and the evolution of marketing.
Love that. This has been great, Jeff.
Just before we get to the post-pod with V and I'd like to take a second and just ask to see if you could leave a review. We're always looking for ways to make this show better and really love your feedback. All right, V, post-pod.
Here it is.
You ready? You asked me for a new jam. I got a new axe. Here we go. There it is. That's all I got.
Dude, see, he said it. He did it. He committed to it. We have a new jingle. Welcome to the post-pod.
You don't want to hear me play for very long.
That's incredible. I did not expect you to pull out the axe, and it's great.
Yeah, super fun. So we had Jeff on yesterday.
We did.
Yesterday. We're doing the post-pod today.
Yeah.
I took a whole ton of notes.
4 pages, man.
Yeah.
I have 4 pages of notes.
Okay, I'll start with this. And then it's funny, we keep talking about the war between sales and marketing, or the gap between marketing, a CMO and a CFO, or the gap between a CEO and a CMO. And some of that stuff, the epiphany for me was that some of that stuff exists just because we design companies that way. Like we create gaps because we organize based on functional silos instead of thinking about organizing around a customer, like the adopt or learn by adopt. The model.
He didn't say them all. He said there was 8. Or 7 or 8.
But it includes all those functions. And so then you orient the company to support the functions of a customer.
Yeah.
And then I mean, there's other challenges with that he alluded to a little bit, but you get rid of a lot of the gaps that exist because it's not just my budget. This is for the customer.
Yeah.
So for me, that was like a big one. I was like, it's so simple.
It's so simple. The UC is such and I don't know if he coined that term, because the Unified Customer Engine, I've known UC as the Unified Customer Experience. But,
right.
But anyways, I think I was blown away just with the simplicity of it, in the sense that, you know what, when you think about it in that context, it's like, as a group, so say you're on the Learn team, as a group, our sole mission is to really help consumers learn about the product.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And it could mean so many different things. Like, it could be content. It could be making sure we have, a lot of education pieces. We're getting our voice out there, et cetera, et cetera. And when you think about it in that context, it becomes really easy to say, I am helping the consumer do something very specific, but I need help on all these other areas, right? And that's where, the silos get broken down. And I'm sure there's still probably some level of ambiguity. I remember, and this is just like a personal experience, there was a time during one of the companies I worked for, they kind of went through a huge restructure, and they had marketing reporting under kind of like a sales function or a pricing function. And I remember at the time, it was incredibly difficult, because as a marketer, you felt alienated because the person that was leading your function didn't have, say, the marketing acumen, and couldn't be, say, that voice at the table for us to help us bring in more budget, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe I was guilty of not buying into the whole thing, because at the same time, it felt like you're constantly educating when, marketing should just have a stronger seat. But it seems like on Smart's side, it's a lot more, it's constructed in a way where it still gives everybody the autonomy, but it also shows the value of the community and the collective. Yeah. And I think that's what's really interesting about this model.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I do. It's funny because with the scenario, I think I remember you talking about this before. If you have a finance person running marketing, they're going to look at a budget and look at, we talk about spreadsheet marketing.
Yeah.
And they're going to look at the thing like last click.
Yeah.
And if there's not an equal dialogue or discussion, if it is I'm looking at last click and I'm looking at ROAS, ROI, weirdly enough, I was just looking at some of that stuff with Grace and Tom that we've done in the past.
Yeah.
And even Avinash. But if you have this idea of last click and you're looking for ROAS, ROI, it's Black Friday today. That's a thing that you obviously are going to want to optimize for today. But over time, it's a really bad way to optimize.
Yeah, 100%.
Because you're just going to sell more of the thing that was. It was funny. I literally was just listening to Grace talk about this, and you end up optimizing for the best sellers, not for the things that are going to drive incremental value.
Yes.
And it's just based on the channel itself. And so spreadsheet marketing does that. And it doesn't show you how important it is to generate that, from Jeff's language, the out of market demand of future buyers.
Yeah.
And that totally is equally important. I'm not saying that the spreadsheet marketing is important, but it's not the only thing. And it's really probably problematic in the short term.
Yeah. I would argue, if you think about something like Black Friday, if you haven't done enough of your out of market reach earlier in the year, your Black Friday, and you're just operating on, say, the in market, he called it
in market demand.
In market, yeah. So he called it in market, and you're just doing that through the entire year. You're working off an audience that you've already kind of nurtured, but it's the base audience. It's not like an incremental audience. So I think that's where, and I think one of our friends, Nick Bond, put a great post together just around the importance of brand in in something like Black Friday, but it comes before Black Friday, right? So I think anyways, the way he talked about out of market and in market, the importance of each, but also making sure that there was internal language that was using, because he brought up that one example where the CEO, it was a PR, not a stunt, but it was a PR event of sorts that happened in Australia.
Oh yeah,
it got picked up by all the local channels. And then the CEO is using the language, hey, this is a great piece of like out of market
demand
content.
Yeah.
Or
right.
And I think
content. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think when you get to that point where a CEO is completely comfortable with the vernacular, the language that you're using and adopting it, all of a sudden it just kind of creates this ripple effect.
Yeah. And to extend on that, the idea of a generally accepted marketing principle or practice or language, GAMP or whatever, like it is really smart. I mean, we've talked about this for a while, but I think that's part of the problem within marketing. Like we all get these shiny object syndrome, and what's really important today is TikTok. What was really important yesterday was Instagram. Before that was Facebook. And somehow we get, what's the word I'm looking for? We're blinded by the tools, not by the purpose of what I don't mean purpose like Save the Whales purpose. I mean purpose of what we're trying to do. Yeah. Which is really around the financial language of a business, like market penetration, drive cash flow, future cash flow, all those kinds of things. So
I agree.
Yeah, the language is really important to unify that.
And I think I think the problem with us as marketers at times is we can be very malleable, and we can just kind of like shift on a dime and have a different perspective. And I'm not saying like you shouldn't change your perspective if you've come into new research or literature. Like I think that's important. But maybe I think the word I was looking for is like actually flaky. But because like on one day we could be saying one thing, on the other day we may not be saying anything, or that doesn't align. And I think because of that, internally we get this bad rap where we're not very consistent, and we're not consistent because a lot of the things that we're planning, we're doing they're based on a moment in time. And I think we have to start grounding ourselves a little bit, and especially in some foundational elements around some of the the core laws of marketing, some of the marketing effectiveness, research that exists, and just build a foundation off of that. And then, you can change some of the other tactics, but we should all have a common understanding of things like the 60-40 rule, the 95-5 rule, just so we can use that and train everyone internally about it. So then we start building this foundation and this language that everyone's comfortable.
Yeah. Well, and that's the debate that's going on right now with that Marc Ritson started with that article, and then it's been carrying on through WARC and IPA, and I've seen a whole bunch of people talking about it, that Americans are behind in terms of their understanding of marketing effectiveness. I'd lump Canadians in there too.
I think so, yeah.
Because there's, it's weird. I did this analysis looking at the amount of dollars spent by country, and then the amount that they spend to win a Cannes Lion Award. Cannes Lion Award. So. And it's not even close. Like the US spends a ton of money. Yeah. Like if you imagine a graph chart, it's like small, and actually the most efficient is Brazil, weirdly enough. The UK and Australia are somewhere in the middle. And then and like this is in the billions of dollars. And this is not the best way to do this analogy, I'm sure, but it was just something I was looking at. But so the idea is that like almost half of the global ad spend is spent by the States.
Yeah.
And they win most of the awards, but it's almost like the blind squirrel finding a nut kind of thing where they win the most because they spend the most. But
they spend the most.
They also spend the most per award by far, like double or triple the amount almost.
Right.
And so I think there's some of that. It's not to say that you can't be good at marketing if you don't know these principles, but I think you can improve your odds of success and effectiveness in return if you do things like create a unified language, understand the principles of marketing, and then to that point, share that with everyone in the organization because you're all driving towards the same goal, which is what designing the organization around the customer does.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I think that's a spot on. It's actually very even timely for me, making sure that everyone's kind of singing from the same song sheet. Um, it's one of those things where I think at the end of the day, and Jeff said this, it's like we report to the consumer.
Yeah.
And for me, the way he said that, I think just really resonated. And I think it's important that we don't lose sight of that, because the consumer at the end of the day pays our salaries, buys our products, does everything. Yes, we have internal, reporting structures, et cetera. But like the moment you feel that sense of accountability towards the consumer, I think methodologies start changing. Your thinking starts changing. And I think it's really important that we kind of start talking about that a lot more, because I think everyone in an organization has that responsibility.
Totally. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like it does. It's so simple. Like if you change the structure, you change your way of thinking, because now you just reorient yourself towards something different than you had before. So rather than reporting up to the head of marketing or the head of sales or whatever, now you're reporting up to the customer, which is kind of what Eddie was talking about the other day too.
That's true. Yes.
And a lot of other things just solve themselves, or the problems that you have solve themselves, because you've now reoriented and you looked at the problem from a different perspective.
Yeah, because it's very simple. You can simply apply the lens. Like, does a consumer actually care what we're talking about right now? How does it actually help them?
Right.
Because Jeff also said, help buyers buy.
Yeah.
Right. So when you again, so using the lens of the consumer, help them buy. That's a very simple, you don't even call it a framework, but it's a very simple thought process to say, well, this discussion that we're having about this product, how does it help the consumer? How will it help them buy?
Yeah.
Well, it actually checks both boxes. Fantastic. I would even argue layer in the promise to the customer as a part of that thought process, right? So then all of a sudden now you have, just kind of like a checklist of items that you can go through. It's like, does it do this? Does it help the buyer buy? Yep. Is it putting the customer at the center of what we're doing? Is it making a promise to them? I remember Roger had 3 questions. I think it was, don't remember them offhand right now, but just when you apply that lens, all of a sudden becomes, I think, a muscle that you start building, and then it orientates everything in your organization, processes, where to add headcount, anyways, and it makes you more insights and research dependent, which is something that a lot of organizations don't do.
Yep. Well, and there's I think there's a Roger Martin thing around stance and in the way you think. And so the really simple version of how I remember it anyway is, like, let's say you're a chef.
Yeah.
You cook food, right? You prepare food and you deliver food, all that kind of stuff. If you're a chef, but you have a stance of food is fuel, then you can imagine how you might prepare food. In my house, you select food and that kind of stuff. If you're a chef and you think of food as art, then you could imagine how that would change your perception of food and the way you plate it and present it and all that kind of stuff. And so the same thing, like a corporate function, marketing, sales, finance, whatever, can view their job through the lens of the function, or you can look at it through the lens of a customer, and that stance changes everything about how you perceive the world around you.
Yeah. That's great.
One of the other notes I had was around ESOV.
Yep. I have that too.
And I know we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but there's I just like, it's such I'm actually going to start building out a budgeting tool, or not a budgeting tool, but like a deck on how, like, all the stuff that exists out there.
You should be considered.
Yeah. And ESOV can be really powerful, because it's not so much about what you're spending as far as your marketing budget goes, but it's, if you're trying to grow a business, you need to have a certain level of budget to make a dent. And so then I just think that's such a really fundamental thing that can help a lot of businesses to establish a commercial budget, not just a marketing budget.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because I think it gives you a better idea of where you need to be to meet some of these sale targets. Because I know you and I have been a part of this, but sometimes you feel like the sale targets come in and you're like, what? How are we expected to grow that much?
Mm-hmm.
Or, and we're not given, the adequate money. And I guess there's a commercial budget versus a marketing budget,
Mm-hmm.
but I think if you can help an organization understand, like, here's the ESOV,
Mm-hmm.
here's where this is what we're trying to do, it can kind of take the guesswork out of what you need to be spending to help increase that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's again, it's something that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, because you're working over year, you're grounding into things like sales, but you're not talking about the share of voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because and at the end, it is a relative metric, like a marketing budget
100%.
or a commercial budget. It's a relative
100%.
metric to what your competitors are doing. So you have to also incorporate that.
Yeah.
And the idea of a commercial budget is great, because you've got, and the idea around like putting the poker chips on all the different spots.
So good.
Such a great idea. Because you now are coordinating your budgets together, as opposed to like, I want mine, I'm going to steal from them. It's not necessarily a zero-sum game. Like, you're working towards a common goal.
Yeah.
That was a really cool exercise. I would love to try doing that. So the next place
I loved it. I loved it so much, because I even think it helps build, what the goals actually are for each discipline every year. So if your big rock becomes that one chip, it really helps saying, okay, team, this is what we need to do next year. We really need to deliver this experience, or this learning platform, whatever. Like, endless examples there. But then all of a sudden, it really helps the team. It's like, okay, this is what we really need to deliver on this year. This is our, like, the big rock. Because sometimes, we have like 5 things that we have to deliver on. It's like, if you think about it the right way, the thing you're investing most of your time in is going to naturally lift a lot of those other KPIs, or it should, right? Instead of being hyper focused on, say, like a revenue number, or some of the things that we traditionally have performance metrics against.
Yeah. The other one that he mentioned was the culture is behavior, and also the design component of the company helps impact the behaviors that form the culture overall of the company. So I'm super interested. He talked about what was the engagement rate as or maybe it was just an engagement rate. It wasn't a different metric, but there was that other metric he talked about with the sales acceptance rate.
Lead acceptance rate and employment engagement rate is his 2 most important metrics.
Yeah. Like, that's a huge issue. Like, there's always this conversation around sales and marketing being like at opposing ends, like Romeo and Juliet, Montesquieu's, and I forget the other family name, whatever they are. But like, those 2 families, they hate each other, but they have to live with one another. And then if you have a metric like that talks about teamwork and collaboration, with sales acceptance rate, or lead acceptance rate, like, that actually is the thing you're trying to optimize for, which is collaboration.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's so much harder to do when it's, no, I have a sales number to hit, or I have a MQL number to hit, like a lead number to hit, or traffic number to hit.
Yeah.
If they're not coordinated together, then you can see where that leads to problems in engagement and all that kind of thing, because nobody wants to engage with one another.
Nobody wants to. Yeah, I love what you brought it up to. Like, your culture is the worst behavior you will tolerate. I think when you think about it again that way, it really sets the tone of what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, right? And I think that quote has come from somewhere else as well. I just can't remember. I've heard it before.
Yeah, I have heard that too. I don't know where it's
or
from.
A version of this. Yeah. I'm just trying to. Anyways, I was trying to think about it in the moment, like where I had heard that, but I think it's just so true at the end of the day. Or actually, it's like the culture is what you're willing when you walk by, or
brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room, or something like that.
There's that one.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many. Anyways, I'll try to dig it up, but there's so many.
Yeah, that was such a refreshing conversation. I think, like, there's just so many things where you're like, oh, yeah, why don't we do that? To me, like so many obvious things. Like, why don't you just put sales and marketing together under one banner? And you don't need each team carrying their own flag.
Just something even as simple as like when he's talking about out of market to in market. Out of market, you're going to base and you're going to look at your campaigns through emotional metrics, where we try to justify anything out of market or brand through, traditional rational metrics in terms of like, what is it doing from a revenue perspective? What's it doing? But it's like, no. Its purpose is to create that emotional connection with the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So let's measure for what it's actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then subsequently, when it becomes in market, that's when you can start using your rational metrics, but looking at it again as one. You can't look at it as two different things.
So I do on that one. We didn't really get into this during the conversation, but I do think you can use rational metrics in the sense of like, if you were to use CEP, so category entry points, as like one of the things that you're trying to target and segment the market by. So the triggers that make people buy, right? You can anchor and link your brand. You can first measure those by frequency in which they occur. Yeah. And then you can measure the memory link between your brand and a particular category entry point so that buyers remember you when they are in a buying situation for that particular cue or trigger. So you can use rational metrics to do that, but the way to do that isn't by saying like buy now, because they're not buying now. No. I think that's where emotion comes into play in those ads, because you remember those ads because they're entertaining, they're engaging, they're funny, they're whatever they are. Yeah. And they build affinity towards that brand and an emotional connection. And then specifically for like the cue or the purchase trigger that you're trying to link that brand to.
Yeah. I think my only push there is when we think about those larger brand moments is what is the primary KPI we're going to measure success from. And I think in that moment is where you can, because there's a time decay that happens. So you launch a brand campaign, you're trying to build, mental availability, et cetera. Mm-hmm. It's trying to prime them to purchase at a later point.
Right.
So I think because of that, if your primary KPI is really, fixated around some of those emotional metrics, that then you can probably add a multiplier effect to kind of help future revenue that will come from this campaign. Sure. I think that's where it makes sense for us to invest our time in. Mm-hmm. But rationalizing it through your always on tactics, your high intent tactics that you have in market. Yeah. But I think where I struggle, and again, this comes from a performance marketer. Yeah. It's just, I don't want like the performance side to constantly get all the credit, because it's not just the performance.
No. Yeah, no, it wouldn't like it, but you probably wouldn't get the credit if you're measuring for brand metrics.
No, you wouldn't.
It's not memorable because you're also talking to people when you're doing that. You're running reach. Yeah. For those out-of-market buyers, and those out-of-market buyers know less about you, so your brand awareness metrics are going to be lower because the people who remember the most are the people who bought you.
Exactly.
Current customers. The people who are future customers are going to have lower brand awareness metrics. So your activation tactics or performance marketing tactics are probably not going to work on any of that for those people who are out of market.
You know what's funny? I know we're going over what our typical like post pod is, but I came across this research. Now we're just solving problems. But I came across this research that kind of talked about like the 3 phases of kind of like awareness. So like there's awareness, then there's salience, and then there's fame, right? And those 3 things are not the same. Mm-hmm. And when you're thinking about it internally, like it's a progression. Like if you ever want to get to fame, that's like when everyone thinks about this brand without being prompted, it's just there. Mm-hmm. Like Starbucks could be one of those brands,
sure,
where it's just exactly. Yeah. Just think coffee, Starbucks. Mm-hmm. But you don't even need to be prompted. But I think when we're thinking about, those 3 tiers that you need to move towards to get, say, to that fame, it's like you can't miss all the different steps. So you can have a brand there's another. I'm getting the research is like mixed up in my head, but there's a progression that you need to make to get to fame. It's not you can just target fame. Fame could be an end goal, but to get there, you need to be consistent. You need to make sure that you're creating that emotional connection. You need to make sure that you're investing in, helping your consumer buy. Like the Starbucks app, again, is an incredible application that makes it really easy to earn, redeem, and what. So it's a frictionless experience for the consumer. All to say, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say something. I had it, and it's gone. This is where we end the post-pod.
Awareness, salience, and fame.
It's just, I think for me, it's like we can't just move, like have the two opposite things. You can't say like on the one side, I'm focused on performance marketing. On the other side, let's make sure that we're building up to fame. Like it's a progression that you need to have. So it starts like from intent, performance branding. Then you're getting into brand awareness. Like there's a scale that we have to, as marketers, kind of adhere to make sure that we understand how we build to said fame.
Right.
If that is a goal for us.
Right.
That's all I'm trying to say. I think.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That's a good point. Anyway, that was a really good conversation, V.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
I encourage every listener just kind of spend some time with Smart. There's a lot of great literature out there. They're doing some incredible things. And I think for us, like being in Calgary, absolutely love the fact that we have a global company like Smart really doing some great work and being at the forefront of a lot of the marketing stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, V, until next time.
Go chase profitability.
There you go. Yeah. It's so natural when you say it. I feel so awkward when I do that. I can't deliver with the confidence that you do it with. It's really great. I love that you say that.
I appreciate it, buddy. Have a good one.
Oh, you too.